This series will delve into the multifaceted aspects of reproductive justice, amplifying diverse voices and stories that highlight personal experiences, systemic challenges, and advocacy efforts. Through compelling narratives, the series aims to educate, inspire, and foster a sense of community around reproductive rights and justice.
SB 258 is a proposed piece of legislation in New Mexico that ensures all school districts provide medically accurate, comprehensive sexual health education. It strengthens the current mandate with better guidance and resources, while respecting parents' rights to opt their children out. The goal is to improve education on topics like consent, reproductive health, and reproductive relationships.
Hi, I'm Houston Villegas. I'm from the rural and southern town of Barino, New Mexico, and I'm 16 years old and currently attend a public school. I think that sex education in public schools is important because public schools are the only access or resources to help that a lot of youth, especially those in rural communities, depend on. Sex education in schools will not only help to protect the youth, but keep them informed. Nobody can attest to what a child's home life is like, nor the resources that they do or don't have. School should be a safe, well-informed sanctuary for kids of all ages, somewhere they can go and learn about themselves and the things that happen to them as they grow older. It is important to clarify that sex education does not just entail information on sex itself, but rather the changes that occur in every child as they grow older. This includes proper informed teaching of hormones, menstrual cycles, but also just how to be safe in a time where youth are beginning to mature. I started my menstrual cycle at 9 years old, and I remember being really frightened, obviously, because it's not very natural for that to happen. The public school I went to didn't sit me down and explain to me what was going on, and simply told me to start wearing something that I had no idea how to use. I thought, at 9 years old, I was going to die because I was bleeding so much. If not for my mom, I would have been lost and alone during a time where my body was doing something I saw as unnatural. Periods don't just begin when you're 13 or 15, they can begin as early or even earlier than 9 years old. Not every child has a parent figure like I did to be there to guide them, but they do have school. All in all, sex education in public schools is not only the most efficient, but even the safest way to educate youth in New Mexico with proper information and resources that allow youth to understand themselves as they grow without fear.
What is Comprehensive Sexuality Health Education? Comprehensive Sexuality Health Education gives young people accurate and age-appropriate information about sexuality and their sexual and reproductive health. This is critical for their health and survival.
In my experience as a high school teacher, I've had kids come to me and say, I'm pregnant and I don't know what to do. I've had kids come and they want to know about birth control. They're afraid to ask their parents, or they don't want their parents to know, or all sorts of things. Because on one end, you feel that their parents should know, but you also don't know what the home life is like and what will happen if the parents know. But you also want to keep the kids safe, and protected. And they're at an age now where parents can't watch them all the time. I remember one year, I was getting a lot of really crazy questions. And I worked really hard not to show my reactions on my face, okay? And just try to deal with the situation to the best of my ability. And I did have to, for my homeroom class, I did have to send home a letter and say, hey, I want to bring in a professional to talk to them about these things that they're asking. Are you okay with it? And surprisingly, every single parent signed the consent form because they didn't want to have those conversations either. So I brought in the professional, and then I asked my kids, do you want me in the room with you, or do you want me sitting outside the door? I'm not going to leave you, but you want me out this, and then I'll get outside. So then I just sat outside the door, and I've had girls who are pregnant, don't have resources, and luckily I have a lot of friends around me that do have resources, and so I usually will contact a friend and say, hey, what can we do for the student who, is kicked out, is pregnant, kicked out, boyfriend dumped her, or has this, doesn't have, what can we do for them? Everybody assumes that everybody's experience is like theirs, and that's not quite true.
What will be taught in comprehensive sex ed classes? medically accurate and complete information that is age and developmentally appropriate, as well as culturally responsive, trauma-informed, and inclusive to LGBTQ+ youth, survivors of sexual assault, and other youth historically left out of sexual health education.
Sex ed for me growing up was, I remember in 5th grade, we were in a class, it was the girls and the boys, and the nurse came in there and did this whole sex talk with us. And one of the most terrible things was, and looking back now, I could laugh about it because it was so inappropriate, but I get really scared. I hope that in schools, kids are really safe and protected, especially queer and trans folk and people who identify as gay. I wasn't protected at all. I remember at the end of that sex ed class, there was a bag of boy products. You know, you got the deodorants, you got the condoms, you got some paperwork about STDs, and then there was a bag of women hair care products, you know, stuff that they need. And you know, I just remember they somehow let the boys of the class hand out these products, and as I was walking through the line, they were handing out they'll give the girl the product, and then they'll give the boy the product. And when I came in the line, the boys looked at me and they gave me the women's one, you know? And I was in 5th grade. So I hope there are laws and that are protecting these queer, trans students and kids.
According to the 2023 Youth Risk and Resiliency Survey of New Mexico, 16% of students have one or more disabilities. 7% are transgender or non-binary, 19% are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or questioning. Yet these are students often left out of sexual health education, even though they're more at risk of negative health outcomes and violence.
The residential schools provided a sex education class, and they were teaching us about our periods, about sex, difference between genders. So that was all explained to me and encompassed everything that was before I became an adult. So I went out into the real world. Then when I moved to New Mexico, I remember going to the doctor's office and they were saying, okay, you need to get a mammogram. I was like, what is that? So I was able to learn those different screening tests that I wasn't aware of before. So my resources were just only presented to me from school. And then when I became an adult, I was able to learn more about my healthcare services that were going to be provided for me as an adult.
I think the main thing is trying to normalize it, because I come from a generation that it was just very taboo and very uncomfortable to talk about our bodies and how they grow and how they change, and seeing it more as kind of like a gross or dirty thing. That's how I grew up with that. And so as a parent, I'm very intentionally trying to normalize that. Age appropriately, we talk about that with my younger children. About what to expect with their bodies as they're changing. My 7-year-old, she's almost going to be 8, is talking about what is a period. And we've had, age-appropriate conversations before to be able to explain exactly what it is. So you remember when we would say things like, you remember, when mom has like this thing going on every month? Oh yeah, that's what that is. And so because we've had these conversations before and constantly and over, it tends to normalize it for them. My eldest child is non-binary, kind of, I guess, more gender fluid. I'm not sure quite how they identify now. Conversations around that, we try to make it a lot more inclusive of different bodies and different people, and not trying to make any one experience be the outlier or make one thing is different. Everybody's a little different. And so that's also part of the conversations that we have.
Our youth deserve the comprehensive sexual education they need to make real decisions about their own bodies and lives. For more information, please view the caption below.